Story 1: Church Rock. The Navajo Radiation Horror. They warned us not to touch the river, not to drink the water, but some didn't hear, and some had no choice. What I witnessed there will haunt me for the rest of my life. The Church Rock uranium spill of 1979 was unlike anything most people had ever seen. Over 1,100 tons of radioactive tailings poured into the Rio Puerco, a river that ran through the heart of Navajo lands. Families were caught off guard. Livestock drank from the water. Sheep, goats, and cattle either died or gave birth to deformed offspring. And the federal government refused to declare a disaster area. Many Navajo communities were left without aid. As an EPA scientist and a member of the Navajo Nation, I knew I had to act. Within 24 hours of returning from the initial testing teams, I pushed for a transfer to Church Rock. By September 1979, my reassignment was approved, a long-term monitoring project to track the radioactive contamination spreading through the surrounding ecosystems. It wasn't glamorous. The work involved long hours in a potentially radioactive forest, minimal funding, and the constant danger of exposure. But it gave me the chance to serve my people directly. From the fall of 1979 to the winter of 1981, I was based in McGaffey, a small town about 20 miles south of Church Rock. Every Monday, I loaded my truck with soil corers, containers for plant samples, and a Geiger counter, then drove past faded warning signs toward the woods. The landscape was deceptively peaceful. Dry washes ran with yellow-stained sediment. Trees loomed overhead, silent witnesses to the invisible poison flowing beneath their roots. I followed a grid system mapped out by my colleagues, collecting soil and tree samples, testing for radioactivity. And then I began seeing the results, and they were terrifying. Some soil samples had radiation levels over 100 times higher than normal. Trees absorbed radioactivity in their bark and needles. The contamination wasn't just in the river. It had spread into the forest itself. One crisp autumn day in 1980, about a year into my trips, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A small, mutated deer, no taller than my waist, stood about 20 feet away. Its right eye was missing, replaced by a sunken socket. A tumor bulged from its skull, distorting its head. One front leg bent at a grotesque angle. Its fur was patchy, exposing scabby, discolored skin. The tail was barely a nub. It wasn't aggressive. It just watched me, shallowly breathing, too weak to flee. My first thought: radiation. Chronic exposure in developing animals could cause exactly this. I noted its location in my field book, checked the Geiger counter. It spiked slightly and carefully retreated. As a Navajo, this site was more than just science. It was a spiritual violation. Our elders teach us to live in harmony with animals, to honor them as family. This deer's suffering was a deep wound to that harmony. Summer 1981 brought another danger: a wildfire. My coworker, Tom, had gone out early to collect water samples. By the afternoon, smoke was rising, and the fire spread toward our monitoring area. Tom barely escaped, his body blackened with soot. But his account was chilling. While fleeing, he saw a massive sphere of flame, 6 feet across, floating through the woods, burning steadily, not flickering like normal fire. The official report dismissed it as a hallucination caused by smoke inhalation or a burning branch caught in an updraft. But as a Navajo, I remembered the elders' stories of witch lights, restless spirits manifesting near tainted land. Whether it was science or spirit, the fire left its mark. The woods were scarred, the river still poisoned, and the land seemed restless. But nothing prepared me for what came next. In September 1979, during a routine sampling trip, I came across a small cave tucked into a sandstone ridge, a mile and a half south of the spill. At first, I heard a low groan. A wounded animal, I thought. But as I approached, the truth was worse than anything I had imagined. A man emerged. His skin was peeling and blackened, sores oozing. His jaw hung slack, his eyes cloudy, his tongue swollen and discolored. He dragged himself on bony arms, his legs barely able to hold him. I recognized the signs immediately. Acute radiation poisoning. His body had been ravaged by radium and thorium in the soil and water. I ran back to my truck, grabbed water, and returned, keeping my distance to avoid contamination. I stayed with him until Forest Service crews arrived. He was rushed to the hospital but died hours later. Autopsy confirmed it. Lethal radiation exposure. He was a hermit, a Navajo man who had ignored, or never heard, the warnings. By winter 1981, my assignment ended. The EPA shifted focus. Cleanup was minimal, and church rock faded from headlines. The river remained toxic. Livestock continued dying, and the land stayed haunted by the aftermath. I carried the memories with me. The twisted deer, the floating sphere of fire, and the hermit crawling from the cave. They were constant reminders of negligence, the fragility of life, and the heavy weight of duty. But they also strengthened my resolve. I continued fighting for the land, for my people, and for the truth about Church Rock. There were no heroes, only those willing to confront the darkness. And sometimes, the darkness looks like a river. Church Rock taught me that some horrors are invisible, some scars run deep, and some stories must be told, so that the dead, the poisoned, and the forgotten are never silenced. Story 2, Hinterkaifeck, the German farmhouse nightmare. They said the farm was cursed, that something walked behind the house at night. We laughed. We shouldn't have, because when the snow settled, 6 people were dead, and the murderer was still inside the walls. In 1922, in rural Bavaria, Germany, the Hinterkaifeck farm was home to Andreas Gruber, his wife Casilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, her 2 children, and an elderly maid named Maria. On a cold March evening, Andreas noticed footprints leading from the forest to the farm, but not away. Neighbors had seen strange smoke in the chimney, unexplained noises in the attic, and the family reported hearing someone walking behind the house at night. They laughed it off, or perhaps feared reporting it. And then came the slaughter. Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, spoke of strange occurrences. Keys vanished, tools moved, whispers echoed in the barn. He found fresh footprints in the snow, 6-toed prints unlike any ordinary boot. Even the livestock seemed agitated, refusing to enter the barn. Neighbors were worried, but the family dismissed their fears. Andreas' warnings about something watching us were met with polite concern, not intervention. The night of March 31st, 1922, would change everything. Days later, neighbors finally checked the farm after nobody responded. What they found was horrific. Andreas and Casilia were hacked to death in the barn. Victoria, her children, and Maria were found inside the farmhouse, murdered in their beds. There were no signs of forced entry, no robbery, only the evidence of brutal, calculated violence. Investigators were baffled. The snow outside showed footprints leading to the house, but none leading away. It was as if the killer vanished into thin air. Inside the house, investigators noticed chilling details. Food left uneaten on the table. The front door locked from the inside. Tools missing from the barn, later found hidden in the woods. A note in Victoria's handwriting, mentioning someone is in the house with us, though authorities later speculated it was too cryptic to confirm. Locals whispered rumors. Ghosts of the old farm, a family curse, or perhaps a deranged neighbor. But no one could solve the mystery. Over the decades, many theories emerged. A family member? Some suspected Victoria's estranged husband, though no proof existed. An outsider with a grudge? Possibly a neighbor jealous of the farm's prosperity. A supernatural explanation? Locals swore the farm was haunted by the restless dead, a presence that walked behind the house before the killings. To this day, Hinterkaifeck remains unsolved. The footprints, the whispered warnings, the locked doors, everything points to something beyond normal explanation. Imagine the night sky over Hinterkaifeck. Snow thick on the ground, wind moaning through the trees, a lone light flickering in the farmhouse window. Someone or something moves silently behind the house. The family sleeps unaware. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the shutters feels like a predator circling. And then the shadows take shape. A figure appears in the doorway. The scream is muffled, the struggle brief. Silence returns, as if nothing happened, but 6 lives are extinguished. Hinterkaifeck reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it lingers in silence, in footprints that vanish in the snow, in shadows that watch while we sleep. And sometimes it never leaves. Story 3. The Axeman of New Orleans. Jazz, fear, and shadows. They said he moved to the rhythm of the jazz, then axe in his hand, a shadow in the alley. When the music played, New Orleans danced. But behind closed doors, no one was safe. Between 1918 and 1919, New Orleans was terrorized by a mysterious killer known only as the Axeman. The murderer broke into homes with an axe, murdering occupants in their beds. What made him infamous wasn't just the brutality, it was the taunting letters he sent to the newspapers. One letter claimed, "I am the Axeman. I will kill again, but anyone playing jazz will be spared." The first attack was almost surreal. Joseph and Catherine Maggio, a Sicilian couple, were hacked to death in their home while sleeping. Neighbors reported hearing screams echoing through the streets, but by the time anyone arrived, it was too late. Soon more homes were targeted. The killer left no fingerprints, no clear trace, only a trail of terror. And yet, he communicated with the city through letters full of arrogance and dark humor. The city panicked. People locked their doors, barred their windows, and yet still, some dared to defy him. The Axeman's letters were clear. Play jazz and you live. That night, New Orleans jazz clubs thrived, and the streets filled with music, syncopated rhythms mixing with fear. Imagine walking home through dimly lit alleys, hearing a distant saxophone, knowing a killer could be watching from the shadows. Every note was a lifeline, every drumbeat a heartbeat closer to survival or death. The axeman's letters were part of the horror. They revealed he was selective. He mocked the police, claiming they were powerless. He promised more killings if his rules weren't followed. One chilling excerpt read, "I will be in your neighborhood next if you don't play jazz. Expect me." The city obeyed. Jazz poured from every open window, a soundtrack of survival. Yet no one ever caught him. Picture a foggy New Orleans night. Gas lamps flickering, shadows moving across wet cobblestone streets, the faint clatter of shoes echoing. A window opens, the piano plays. Somewhere nearby, a figure waits, silent, hidden, an axe reflecting the dim light. The tension is unbearable. Every sound, a falling leaf, a creaking shutter, feels like a threat. Inside the homes, families huddle, listening to jazz as if it were a shield. They hear whispers, footsteps, maybe nothing, maybe him. Fear becomes tangible, a living presence that breathes alongside them. Despite dozens of attacks and taunting letters, the axeman was never caught. Some believe he was a local man with knowledge of the city's layout. Others whisper that the killer was almost supernatural, able to appear and vanish without a trace. The legend grew, blending reality and myth. Jazz, fear, and murder intertwined, leaving New Orleans with a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are human, but they can still move like ghosts. When you hear jazz late at night in New Orleans, remember the axeman. Somewhere in rhythm with the drums and the sax, a shadow may be moving. And even if it's only a story, it feels real enough to make you sleep with the lights on. Story 4. The Villisca Axe Murders. It was a quiet summer night in Villisca, Iowa. The town lay bathed in silver moonlight, streets empty, crickets singing in the still air. But silence, as comforting as it seems, can be deadly. In one modest home, behind white picket fences and blooming lilacs, a horror was waiting to unfold that would shock the nation and haunt the town forever. The Moore family lived here. Josiah and Sarah, devoted parents. Their children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, and 2 young nieces, Ina and Lena Stillinger, visiting for the summer. To the neighbors, they were a picture of small-town perfection, kind, hardworking, and quiet. The house, though modest, radiated warmth, laughter drifting from the kitchen, children running through the hallways. But on June 10th, 1912, that warmth would be extinguished forever. That night, the family retired to bed early. The town clock struck 10:11 midnight. No one noticed the shadow slipping through the trees, moving with chilling purpose. In the darkness of the Moore home, an intruder wielded a blunt axe, and in a matter of hours, every member of the family and the visiting nieces lay lifeless in their beds, blood staining the wooden floors and the walls of a home that had known nothing but laughter and love. Morning arrived, and neighbors, expecting the usual greetings, were met with silence. The town sheriff, upon entering the house, found the unimaginable. Bodies of children still tucked in bed, adults sprawled across the floors, the gruesome scene frozen in the faint morning light. The town of Villisca was thrown into panic. How could something like this happen here? Who could commit such unspeakable acts? Theories ran wild. Some said it was a neighbor, a man scorned or mentally unhinged. Others whispered about traveling murderers, perhaps someone passing through, leaving nothing but death behind. One man, still remembered in local lore, was arrested and released. Evidence too thin, suspicion too fleeting. The case went cold. And yet, even today, visitors report strange things. Lights flickering, footsteps in empty rooms, a sense of eyes watching from the corners of the home. The Moore House stands still today, preserved as a chilling reminder of that night. Paranormal investigators claim the spirits of the family linger, replaying their final moments in whispers and shadows. Tourists shiver at the sight of tiny handprints appearing on dusty windows, doors opening and closing on their own, and the faint sound of a child's laughter echoing through empty halls. Villisca may be quiet, but the darkness of that night has never left. Story 5. The Hinterkaifeck Murders. Deep in the snow-covered Bavarian Alps, a small, isolated farm sat cloaked in silence. The year was 1922, and the Koenig family's homestead, Hinterkaifeck, was a place where neighbors rarely ventured. But isolation can be deadly. For here, hidden beneath layers of snow and frost, a nightmare would unfold, one that would puzzle Germany for decades and chill the blood of anyone who heard its story. The Koenig family lived quietly on their remote farm. Andreas Koenig, his wife Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 children, Kazilia and Joseph. Life was simple but harsh, farming, chopping wood, tending livestock. Neighbors rarely saw them, and visits were infrequent, but the family's routines were orderly, predictable, even comforting in their small world. Until one winter, predictability became a death sentence. Strange signs appeared in the days before the murders. Footsteps in the snow leading to the house, a key found under the mat that wasn't theirs, strange sounds in the attic at night. The family laughed it off, or perhaps they feared speaking it aloud. On the night of March 31st, 1922, the farm became a scene of unimaginable terror. Andreas and Kazilia Koenig were struck down in the barn, their bodies discovered days later. Victoria and her children were murdered inside the house, each blow cruel, precise, leaving behind a silent horror that no one could explain. The killer, or killers, remained unseen, leaving only chaos, blood, and fear in their wake. What made this crime even more horrifying, the family had reported strange occurrences days before. The killer may have been inside their home, watching, waiting, a predator living with them before striking. Neighbors noticed the family's absence for several days. When authorities finally arrived, the scene was horrifying. Footprints leading from the barn to the forest, an open attic trapdoor, food left uneaten on the table, and the lifeless bodies of a family wiped out in the snow. No clear motive, no eyewitnesses, and no confession. Germany was gripped by the mystery. Who could commit such an atrocity in a place so remote, and why? The investigation uncovered chilling details, signs of a lingering presence, food eaten after the murders, evidence suggesting the killer returned to the house. The idea that the family's last days were filled with terror, yet they could not escape it, made the story all the more terrifying. Suspicion fell on neighbors, distant relatives, even wandering criminals. But no one was ever convicted. Some theorized it was revenge, others, a psychopathic intruder seeking blood. Over the decades, the story of Hinterkaifeck became legend, a tale of eerie footprints in snow, whispers from the attic, and the chilling sense that the family knew their end was near, but could not flee. Even today, Hikers in the area report strange occurrences, sudden cold spots, the feeling of being watched, and sometimes a distant scream carried across the valley, fading into silence. Hinterkaifeck has never been forgotten. The farm was eventually torn down, but the story lingers, like frostbite in the mind. Ghost hunters claim the spirits of the Koenigs roam the snow-laden fields, replaying their final moments in whispers and shadows. The isolation that once protected them became a tomb, a chilling reminder that evil can strike even in the most remote corners of the earth. Some murders leave questions that can never be answered and shadows that never fade. Story 6. The Zodiac Killer. First Murders. It was a warm summer evening in Northern California, 1968. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the towns of Vallejo and Benicia bathed in twilight. Teenagers were out on dates, couples parked along quiet roads, and life felt ordinary, innocent. But that ordinary night would be shattered by a killer who would terrify an entire state, leaving a trail of blood, cryptic messages, and questions that remain unanswered to this day. This was the beginning of the Zodiac Killer. The first confirmed attack was on Betty Lou Jensen, 16, and David Faraday, 17, parked along a secluded stretch of Lake Herman Road. They were young, carefree, their lives just beginning. But on that night, a shadowy figure approached, and everything changed. A gunshot pierced the quiet. 2 lives were gone in an instant, and a terror had been unleashed that no one could have predicted. Unlike other killers, the Zodiac was methodical, meticulous, and utterly chilling. He would leave no fingerprints, no clear motive, only messages and ciphers that taunted the police and the public. In his letters, he claimed dozens of murders, his cryptic symbols and twisted humor sending shivers down the spine of anyone who read them. What made the Zodiac terrifying was not just his violence, but his mind. He turned murder into a puzzle, a game, daring the authorities and the public to catch him while he struck again. Just months later, on July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were ambushed at Blue Rock Springs Park. Shots rang out in the dark, leaving Darlene dead and Michael gravely injured. The killer vanished into the night, leaving only questions and terror in his wake. Witnesses would later describe a man in a hooded jacket, his face obscured, his presence as fleeting as it was horrifying. The sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. People no longer felt safe in parked cars, in quiet fields, even in their own homes. The killer was invisible, untouchable, yet closer than anyone dared imagine. Then came the letters. Postmarked to local newspapers, the Zodiac taunted police with puzzles only he could solve. "I like killing because it is so much fun," he wrote, delighting in his own cruelty. Each symbol, each coded message, was a step deeper into the mind of a psychopath who thrived on fear. The letters made it clear. The Zodiac wanted attention, control, and terror. He was no ordinary murderer. He was a predator, a master of psychological horror, turning entire communities into his playground. The Zodiac Killer would strike multiple times across Northern California, leaving bodies, letters, and codes. Though many have tried to decipher his messages, his identity remains a mystery. For decades, the people of Vallejo, Benicia, and beyond lived under a shadow, knowing that at any dark corner, the Zodiac could strike again. And even today, as we read about him, the chill remains. The Zodiac represents the fear that evil can hide in plain sight, that danger can lurk behind a friendly face, that terror can be delivered in silence and then vanish without a trace. The Zodiac's letters continue to inspire fear and fascination. Cryptic messages remain unsolved, and the identity of one of America's most infamous killers is still unknown. Perhaps the most terrifying part is this: he could have been anyone, anywhere, and the shadows he cast over those summer nights of Northern California linger still, whispering in the dark, daring us to uncover the truth. Some killers leave bodies, some leave puzzles, but some leave both, haunting generations long after they disappear.